How's it going, everybody? RazingHel here, and today we're going to be doing something of a play-by-play of the various waves in Don't Starve Together the Forge. So what we have here, of course, is the map of the Forge arena. This right here is where the players spawn in. So I've marked that with an X. And then there are 3 enemy spawns on the map as well. One is to the left, one is to the right, and one's on the bottom. And enemies only spawn from these 3. They do not ever spawn from the one where the players spawn, so that's basically a safe spot all the time. So let's talk a little bit more about the waves. Now I'm going to be breaking down the waves according to the information that I saw presented on the wiki group for Don't Starve Together the Forge. Now, while I have spotted mistakes in the information that they have, I think their breakdown of the waves is far more detailed than anything that I had come up with, so that's why I'm going to be using their data on that. So for our first wave, we basically have 4 parts to it. The first part is basically a spawn with 1 pit pig at each of these spawn points, the enemy spawn points. One of the best ways to deal with these first few waves is to send 2 players to deal with each. So if you could think about it, like a tank and a DPS at each spawn here. And generally this will help, especially in later waves when there are more pigs. It's better to have, and this is like before you get the healing stuff, it's better to have like 3 pigs on 2 players as opposed to having all the pigs join up in the center and then letting them gang up on just 1 or 2 tanks. That's generally how things can descend into chaos. So that takes care of the first spawn for the first wave. Okay, so here we move on to the second spawn for the first wave. As you can see, we have 2 pit pigs at all 3 locations. And like I said before, one of the best ways to deal with these is to have people team up on 2s. Now we've moved on to the third spawn of the first wave. I know this can seem a little bit confusing of a way to do it, but believe me, it helps categorize things. We still have pit pigs, as you can see, and this is the wave. Once you've completed it, the healing staff will drop. So this is like the farthest you ever have to go usually without any sort of serious crowd control. Obviously, if you have like a Maxwell or a Wicker, any character that can read books, you'll be capable of crowd control before this, but for those who are relying entirely on the staff, you know, this is like the next wave is the first time you'll have the ability to do so. Which of course brings us to the 4th spawn of the first wave. And this one is one that I've seen players die on, players who aren't very experienced yet. One of the best ways, of course, to deal with this is via crowd control methods, either petrification or even healing. In the center, if you have somebody who can juggle a book and a heal, you can just put like a heal down here, they can all come to the center. And then once they're sleeping and the heal is about to expire, you can simply throw down a petrification on them. And during the process of this, the tanks should be targeting them 1 or 2 at a time to easily take them out. You can easily cycle between heals and petrification if you have that going on. Let's move on to wave 2 now. So wave 2 has 2 spawn parts to it, much like wave 1 had 4 spawn parts. The first spawn part to wave 2 involves 3 pit pigs and 1 Craw Commander. This is the first time we see the Craw Commander in the Forge. This is basically when we're introduced to them for the first time. They only spawn on the left and the right enemy spawn portals, so you don't have to worry about the bottom one. When it comes to dealing with these, of course, we have the problem of Craw Commanders spawning in their battle standards. So generally what will happen is if everybody goes down to, say, this spawn, and then let's say Wicker goes ahead and petrifies this spawn over here. What will happen then is when everybody's down here working on this, these will become unpetrified, and the Craw Commander will throw down his battle standard here or so, and if somebody isn't going up there to take it out, then the enemy troops are receiving buffs. Of course, if you're not familiar with what a battle standard is, there are basically 3 of them. 1 buffs attack, 1 sort of buffs defense, and the other one is for healing. I'm not sure of I should have done like a red cross or something, but you get the point. So the battle standards buff enemy troops, the Craw Commanders call them in. The Craw Commanders also direct the pit pigs. So the pit pigs will target whatever the Craw Commander is aggroed onto. For example, here's Woody. If the Craw Commander decides that Woody's aggroing him, the pit pigs will attack Woody, preferably over other targets, all things being equal. Obviously you can break that, but that's something to keep in mind, and probably a good reason not to let DPS characters pull the aggro from the Craw Commanders without letting a tank, pull the aggro first, because otherwise you're going to have like Weber running around and a whole bunch of pit pigs on him, and that means he basically can't do anything, right? The second spawn for wave 2 is basically the same thing. We have the exact same composition. And this was one thing that I saw the wiki get wrong. They simply excluded this wave altogether, I think. But it's there. I have video evidence of it, unless I'm playing some sort of special modded version of Don't Starve that I'm not aware of. So the second wave, the second spawn for the second wave is exactly the same as the first, and the same tactics apply to it. Okay, now we move on to wave 3. Wave 3 introduces the Snurtles. They have been renamed multiple times, so if I get their names wrong, please forgive me. You can't expect Clay to change the name of a mob every weekend, and then the players will automatically just follow suit. So I think these have actually gone through a name change once. The Scorpions have actually gone through a name change 3 times now, so it's quite confusing. So on this wave, we have two Snurtles spawning on the left and the right sides of the arena, and 3 down here at the bottom. One way that you can obviously deal with this, because you do not want to spread damage out over all of them, because this results in a scenario where basically they're all spinning all over the arena. That's a great way for pretty much everybody to get killed. So you want to focus your fire, much like for most of the mobs, you want to focus your fire as well, obviously, but especially true for the Tortang. So in general, like one of the tactics that I've seen used, obviously, is maybe 2 characters will go over here, and they will be effective at kiting them and perhaps petrifying them. If you don't have somebody who can do petrification, maybe they'll just be a kite working the 3 of them, or maybe they can pull all 5. It depends upon how skilled your kiting player is. And then the other players, remaining 4 players or 5 players, depending upon how many, will deal with these 2 or these 2 at a time. Generally, they don't deal with the 3 down at the bottom first. An alternative to this, of course, is if you actually pull them all together. So if your team is capable of keeping them permanently petrified, for example, you could just draw them into the center and pick them off one by one while somebody cycles the books and keeps them constantly petrified, the ones that aren't being targeted. That's an alternative strategy as well. It all depends on your team composition. One method might not be viable with certain team compositions, or the other one might not be. So it's nice to have your options open. I think it pretty much does it, and we're going to be moving on to the next wave, which would be wave 4. So wave 3 only had 1 spawn to it. On wave 4, we're dealing with the Scorpions. They're the ones who used to be called the Venomiers and all kinds of ridiculous other names. I forget them. At the moment, though, they're called Scorpions, which at least is easy to say, even if it's like a funny derivative of the actual word. So the Scorpions, this is the first time we see them. They have a unique attack that basically is them throwing acid. It's a little bit of an area of effect attack, so that means that you want to keep your distance from them, especially if you are a ranged character. There's really no reason for the DPS characters to get up close and personal with them. That is actually a great way for the entire team run to fail. So for the Scorpion spawn, we will have 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and 3 on the bottom, much like the ones for the Snortuses. Obviously, the same tactics can apply, where 2 players or 1 player over here can kite and or / petrify these 5 Scorpions. It could be these 2 over here, it's interchangeable. Alternatively, they can also, much like the Snurtles, be petrified in the center if you have somebody who's capable of cycling books, or if you are okay with cycling between 1 book and healing to keep them either sleeping or petrified while you deal with them 1 at a time. Both of them seem to work fairly well. I can't attest to the speed of those strategies, as I'm not somebody who speed runs the Forge, obviously. I have won the Forge multiple times, and I'm just pointing out the strategies that I have personally employed and that I've seen others talk about actively. as being good strategies. So that pretty much covers this round. I don't think there's really a whole lot else to go for other than, you know, keep your distance if you can. Tanks should also try to prioritize attacking when they're capable of healing, because healing will, if you have a heal down here and the tank is inside there and the scorpion throws acid at the tank, it won't really have any effect because the tank is actually healing at the same time, and the heal just immediately cancels the poison effects or the acid effects of, or the poison effects of the acid, I suppose it is. One other important thing to note about acid, I might not have mentioned this, is that it actually ignores your armor defense completely. So that's why players tend to take a lot of unexpected damage from it. But I would say the biggest reason that this stage usually fails, or this wave usually fails, or players fail it generally comes down to DPS characters just getting way too damn close to the scorpions. Okay, so we're moving on to wave 5. Wave 5 starts with 1 scorpion and 1 tor tank spawning on the left and the right. You might be wondering, this is a pretty small wave, and that's true, but then we move on to the spawn for wave 5.2, basically. 5.2 is when the gorilla comes in, and this is the first part where the kiter can really come into their own, where they become an absolutely essential part of the team, because this guy cannot be petrified, or, I mean, he can be slapped, but he can't be petrified effectively. So what we do here, this is 5.1, and there has been like some contention as to how this guy spawns. I am of the opinion that he is on a timer. So in other words, he'll spawn at a set time after the two spawns over here happened from the previous spawn of this wave. But there is also an alternative hypothesis that states that he spawns when these two the 2 scorpions and the 2 snurtles actually drop below like 50% health. It's a little bit conflicting, but it really doesn't matter because he spawns pretty quickly into wave 5, despite the fact that he is considered like a separate spawn. He doesn't spawn at the exact same time that the 2 over here did. So when we're talking about this, like I said, this is sort of when the tank starts to come into his own. I mean, the runner, generally what the runner will do is try to pull the aggro from the Poirier and distract him away from the team. So if the team's down over here fighting, you know, the runner will run around up here and keep the gorilla's aggro on them. And that will protect the rest of the team while they deal with those enemy spawns, which moves us nicely on to wave 6. Now, wave 6 starts with the spawn of 2 gorillas. Our runner is not going to be able to deal with both of these, obviously, so the runner will choose one. In general, in the games that I've played, they tend to go for the one here on the right, more than the one on the left. The team usually takes the one on the left, so the rest of the team will usually gang up on this one, and then the runner will do what the runner does for this one, as mentioned before. Let's move on to the next scene here. So now this is like spawn 2. At this point, the gorillas will both still be alive. So there will be a gorilla down here being fought by the team, let's say, and there will be a gorilla over here that's being kited by the runner. When this gorilla reaches his phase 2, this is basically when he can start doing the jump attack instead of just doing the swipe attack. That's when the Craw Commander and 2 pit pigs spawn in. Now, this is usually quite easily dealt with, but it is important to note that the proper sort of way to do this, and it comes into play a little bit later, is to let the tank down here, one tank down here, distract this gorilla. The runner up here is distracting this gorilla, and then the rest of the team moves their way over to these guys and takes them out. So that way you don't have pit pigs and you don't have Craw Commanders just causing trouble, because Craw Commanders are going to spawn in flags, and also it prevents any additional progression in the forge, because if you continue to attack the gorillas, they can actually advance the forge along, and that is generally something you don't want. You don't want to advance to the next waves until you have killed the smaller fries, right? So let's move on to the next part of this. This would be wave 6.3. So basically, wave 6, spawn 3 is the way I see it. This happens, the gorilla that the kiter is kiting will still be alive. So the kiter is still running around over here, kiting this gorilla. This is a gorilla. But the one down here has been killed. So this gorilla is no more. The team just finished killing them, and that brings in these guys. So what will spawn once this one Barilla is down are 2 Scorpions, 2 Snurtles, and 1 Craw Commander with 2 Pit Pigs. And this can be a sort of a make or break spawn, because what can happen sometimes is if the runner loses the aggro of the Barilla over here, and then he gets intermingled with all of this stuff, the team can get killed if they're not paying attention. And then there's also the possibility that team members who don't really know how this works are attacking this Barilla that just got loose here, instead of attacking the small enemies. And this can actually spawn in the Grand Forged Warrior. If this Barilla takes too much damage, and you don't want that to happen, the Grand Forged Warrior can actually spawn even though these smaller enemies are still on the map, and that pretty much guarantees your failure. So it's important at this part of the game to make sure that your runner is keeping the Barilla distracted, or if he can't, maybe send one of the tanks over to deal with that while the rest of the team continues dealing with these enemies over here. And obviously this type of tactics you can use to deal with them apply to the way you might deal with them in the former waves. Which brings us quite nicely onto the last wave, Wave 7. Wave 7 has 2 spawns to it, obviously. The first spawn is when we have the Grand Forged Warrior come into play. Now at this point, most likely, the team will still be fighting the Barilla because it still has some health left when the Grand Forged Warrior spawns. The Grand Forged Warrior is sort of linked to this guy. So if the warrior takes too much damage, then this guy spawns, even like I said, if there are other enemies still on the map. So usually the team can actually take down the Barilla by the time the Grand Forged Warrior becomes a threat. So he'll be over here for a while, come walking over, and usually by that time, if your team is focusing fire like I should, and saving up their ults to break the Barilla's defenses, you should have taken him out, no problem really whatsoever. So then that brings us to the Grand Forged Warrior. So for the first half of this fight, basically, it's generally the best to keep him in the center here. And there's a good reason for this, is because for spawn 2 of this, that he's going to draw in 4 flags. So let's say there's a flag there, there's a flag here, and the flag here. Now, if these are defensive flags, they absolutely must be taken out, because you will not be able to kill the Pit Pigs that spawn in the next spawn. So that is why you want to pull the Grand Forged Warrior to the center, because that way it's easy to sleep him. This is where we're going to be sleeping him, along with the Pit Pigs, and it allows whoever is holding the Infernal Staff to cast the Cataclysm on them, and that should wipe them out, or get very close to wiping them out. Like there'll be 1 hit or so left before they're actually dead. So that covers the first part of the Grand Forged Warrior fight. Then we move on to the second one, the Grand Forged Warrior. This is spawn 2. The Grand Forged Warrior is still alive, and he should be here. I was trying to make it like these are legs and these are arms. Okay, he should be in the center, basically. And at this point, there are going to be 3 Pit Pigs that spawn from the left and the right, and 4 Pit Pigs that spawn at the bottom spawn. Obviously, this is a safe spawn up here, so if your healer is in danger of getting aggro, this might be a better place to be on the map, a better side to be, because if the healer can't get the heal down, and if the... yeah, that's basically it. So once this happens, the healer needs to throw down the heal pretty soon, pretty quickly. And the Grand Forged Warrior needs to be in the center or off to the side. He can be off to the side. I've heard some people say that it's better for him to be off to the side because it allows more room for all the players to get in there, but I personally have never had a problem with space, really. But apparently some people have, so I guess that's something I can't relate to. So you pull all of these in here into the heal. This is going to sleep them along with the Grand Forged Warrior. Then the person who has the Infernal Staff casts the Cataclysm on them. So we're getting a bit crowded here, but we're going to need a Cataclysm, and it's going to kill all of the Pit Pigs in the circle or damage them very severely and make it easy to finish them off. And this is sort of a clinch part of the game. A lot of players, and I meant to say that 3 times, they die on this stage. And that applies to me as well. The games that I haven't won are generally due to people messing up during this part of the stage. And generally, most of those mess ups are directly attributed to the players, not to RNG. Like I said before, there will be flags that spawn for that part. When the Grand Forge Warrior starts clacking his horns together, those things he uses as weapons, he'll spawn in 4 flags. If they are defensive flags, you need to take them out. Otherwise, the enemy pigs will not take them, the pit pigs will not take enough damage, obviously. If there are other flags, you can ignore them, but it's usually pretty simple to take them out anyway if you're in the center of the forge, obviously, because your DPS characters can generally stand here and take them out at range. So you can stay in the heal, you can stay in the sleep, and remove these flags at range to make sure that all the pit pigs actually do make it inside the heal and they don't aggro onto somebody running around out here taking care of the flags. So with that out of the way, then we sort of move into the final phase. And at this point, you're still going to be fighting the Grand Forge Warrior. I don't actually have a slide for this. In general, I should have had one. In general, at least for less experienced players, the best strategy generally tends to be to drag them out to a corner of the map. It could be a corner there, it could be in the spawn here. These spawns are a little bit bigger, so like those are not quite as nice, but in general you want to sort of get them against the edge of the map because it makes it a lot easier to hold them in place, and it also makes it possible for ranged units to sort of like stand here and shoot at him, and it's much less likely that they will take damage due to that. Another tactic that is frequently used is if you have 2 tanks, and you should, they should alternate with the Grand Forge Warrior. So in other words, one tank stands out here, just basically waiting, preserving their health. The other one is in here, pulling the Grand Forge Warrior's aggro, keeping him in that corner. And when this one gets low in health, let's say, during a sleep, they'll swap out, and then this one will become the main tank that keeps the Grand Forge Warrior in there, and the other one will swap out until the next heal, so that way they can heal up and make sure that if one of them dies, you have a backup tank to get in there and distract him, and distract the Grand Forge Warrior. One of the mistakes that I've seen players make, and this is important because if you're dying, if you're the person in here and you're dying, stay in here. I've seen so many Wolfgangs. What they'll do is they will get low in health, they will come very fast, and they'll run out here, and then they're crazy running around, and the Grand Forge Barrier follows them and it is killing everybody in sight with his area of effect attacks. So if you are the guy, if you're the player that's in here, stay in here even if you die. That's your job as a tank, is to just stay in here. You're not going to be doing that much damage anyway, really, because in general tanks don't deal that much damage. But yeah, your job is to stay in there until, even if you die, that's your job, to keep that going. If you die in there, no problem. The other tank comes in, keeps Grand Forge Barrier in that spot. There are other alternative ways of doing it, obviously, but I think they're generally applied to much better players than myself. So this is what has personally worked for me. Obviously, I'm not the best player at the game. I'm not the best player at the Forge. So your mileage may vary, but this has quite successfully gotten me quite a few wins, and that's like, I have about half of the characters that I've completed a win on, and I think that's pretty good for somebody like me. I'm pretty happy with what I've done there. So I hope this was edifying. As I've mentioned before, I'm not the ultimate authority on this, so take what I say with a grain of salt, do some research on your own, but I think in general these are pretty solid strategies. If I've missed anything, feel free to point it out or suggest alternative strategies that you've personally seen work below in the comments. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.